apex, roll on, go. Come on. Oh. This is the current American muscle car benchmark with a big V8 under the hood and a soundtrack and burly styling to match. And this is trying to be the new leader, but it could also be a total letdown. Good thing we've got an empty test track to help us figure all of this out. We're Edmunds, and we test hundreds of cars each year on the road and at our private track, so you get the most trusted reviews. If you want to know which car, truck, or SUV is the best, then stick with us. This is the new Dodge Charger Sixpack, the gas version of the Dodge Charger EV that we've tested previously. And yes, this thing might not have the old Charger or Challenger Hellcats shrieking, whining, almost 800 horsepower supercharged V8, but instead it's got an inline 6-cylinder engine, which has a giant pair of turbos on it. And very importantly, it now has standard all-wheel drive. And that should help it get off the line, we think, much quicker. So now it's time to get set up for our Excel run. And to do that, we've got it in sport mode. Then we're gonna go to this race options page here, go to launch control. 3,000 RPM is the number that we found works the best. And then to actually activate launch control, there's a button down here you have to press. And the nice thing is that with launch control, it's gonna let me build up that boost pressure before we get going. And that should help this thing get down the track rather quickly, we're hoping. Apply brake pressure, hold full throttle, and then release. Those first 2 gears go by really quick. This thing definitely gets off the line better than a Hellcat, but we're gonna see if it has the legs to carry it through. And across. Man, with the launch control, this thing does get going in a hurry. The Charger Sixpack completed the sprint from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.2 seconds, which is quick, but down from Dodge's claimed 0 to 60 time of 3.9 seconds. If it had hit that number, this would have replaced the Challenger Hellcat Redeye as the quickest gas-powered Dodge that we've ever tested, but it didn't quite get there. It does still edge out the Mustang GT by the slimmest of margins, though weirdly, the Ford, it doesn't come with launch control. Ford took that feature out of the Mustang a couple years ago, and we miss it. Now, we do have to mention that as we were testing this vehicle, the 0 to 60 times, they dropped off really sharply after the first 2 runs. So the first 2 times, they were around that 4.2 range, but then the third time, it was over 6 seconds, and the fourth run was almost 8 seconds. And our test team is guessing that it has something to do with this vehicle's thermal management. Something clearly went wrong. It still allowed us to activate launch control and use that, but it just wasn't getting down our straight very quickly. Something to watch out for. Now, we're testing vehicles all the time here at the Edmunds Test Track, and we post the most interesting stats and numbers on our site, along with the latest car news and reviews. So to get all of that, head over to edmunds.com/news. You can do that via the link in the description or the QR code. Next, it was time to put these cars on the scale, and no surprise here, the Charger weighed significantly more than the Ford. It's simply a bigger car. You can see it when they're parked next to each other. But at 4,874 pounds, it's about 900 pounds more than the Mustang and nearly 400 pounds more than the old Hellcat Redeye. That difference in mass would affect the rest of the numbers we would see in our testing. Like braking. The Charger Sixpack took 122 feet to slow from 60 to 0 miles an hour, while the Mustang makes the same stop in just 100 feet, a huge difference. The Dodge's braking performance was fairly consistent and it tracks straight under hard braking, but all of that weight is simply hard to stop quickly. The Charger's all-season tires are also a factor here, with the Mustang coming on summer tires. Having better rubber would certainly improve braking performance, and it also would have helped on our next test, the dry skid pad. Our test Charger has the wider tires as a part of a $1,200 wheel package, so without that, this number might be even worse. But it only pulled 0.90 lateral G versus the Mustang 0.98 G. Even the old Hellcat Redeye managed to pull 0.99 G. We'll see how this difference in grip plays out on the track in just a bit. Oh, and because we couldn't resist, we had to throw one more unofficial test in here, putting the exhaust note of the Sixpack up against the Mustang's 5-liter V8. Not much of a contest. And that's all the numbers, where the Mustang has a pretty sizable advantage in every area except for acceleration. But we have to find out how all of this plays out on the track. So there are some big differences between these cars that we're going to show. One's got a straight 6, one's got a V8, one's all-wheel drive, one's rear-wheel drive, one's got launch control, one doesn't, and one weighs a lot and one weighs a bit less. Let's see how it does. Oh man. Really, nothing like a V8 when it comes to the noise. Okay, down into the back straight. We're into the hardest braking zone here. Brembo brakes front and rear. This thing is quite stable under braking. I do wish there was a touch more bite at the beginning of the pedal, but it gets the speed down pretty quick, especially for something that weighs just over 2 tons. All right, down to the carousel. The nose of this thing holds a line really well for a rear-wheel drive car. It's much more stable under speed than you would expect, given how big it is and how much it weighs. This is where the stability is really important, because when your car gets light, you really don't want it to be unsettled coming into this corner. But this thing is just great. I know that we call it a muscle car, but this thing, it's actually kind of a driver's car, because the harder that you push it, the more grip that you find, the more communicative the steering becomes, and the way it just lets you sort of subtly rotate the car in corners to get it pointed the right direction, and then let that V8 really unwind. It's a really, really good time. Now, the transmission is a bit of a letdown. This 10-speed, if you let it shift by itself, it always feels just a step late. And if you try to grab the gears yourself, it doesn't really let you downshift until the RPMs dip to around maybe 3,000. And it's just hard to kind of find that pocket where you can keep the revs up as you're exiting a corner. It actually likes to downshift kind of mid-corner if you're yanking on a paddle. So the best way I've found to drive it is just let the transmission do its thing, even if it's a touch slow. You do have to get on the throttle a touch early because it is a naturally aspirated engine, so it takes a second to really kick the torque out, but once you figure it out, you can really get out of corners quickly. You know, around a track, one of these things, it's way more enjoyable than you might think if it's set up the right way. There's a really big difference between the amount of enjoyment you're gonna have behind the wheel of a Mustang and what it has on it. So this thing, it's got the Magna Ride, it's got the performance pack with the summer tires, it's got the active exhaust, it's got the good Recaro seats, which are awesome. And if you set it up like that, you don't just have a muscle car, you just got a great sports car. Oh, the noise. I will say this though, if you're gonna buy one of these, probably buy the manual. Then you don't have to deal with this automatic. And also, that's something you can't do in the Charger. Before we hit the track again, we just wanted to let you know that no matter where you are in your car buying or selling journey, Edmunds is here to help. We've got all the tools on our site, including ones that will help you get an instant cash offer, find new cars near you, as well as tell you the price that you should pay, and research tools to help you find exactly the right ride. Check us out. This thing does get away quick. No wheel spin at all. All right, down the end of the chicane here, at 90 miles an hour. I gotta say though, that noise, it's not the same as that Mustang. I mean, I don't think that this sounds terrible on the outside. I think it actually sounds worse on the inside, but is it gonna be able to match that V8? No, not a chance. All right, back here is back straight, hard braking zone. Ooh. You know, the brake pedal is even spongier than we had in the Ford. And yeah, that added stopping distance, definitely not enough braking power, not enough for this thing's nearly 5,000 pounds of weight. Oh. And you feel that weight everywhere around our track. All right, here we go. Over the hill, where stability is really important, and no. Whoa. Turn in, come on. Pretty much every corner, if you take it and try to turn it in hard, it pushes, and you get that. It just scrubs out all your speed. Now, the low end torque delivery from this engine is probably the best thing about it, but man, just can't get the nose of this thing pointed where you want to at all. On this corner here, I'm supposed to get down to this blue cone, and to do it, you just have to baby it so hard in. If you try to push it at all, the amount of body roll, all the weight, and then also it's on an all-season tire, so you don't have grip. Oh, the nose of this car is just absolutely everywhere. And on top of that, there's like nothing from the steering. Now, this thing is an 8-speed automatic instead of the Ford's 10-speed. But just like in the Ford, it feels a step behind. But even worse, this thing has like the dinkiest paddle shifters I've ever seen. If you look at them from here, it looks like they would extend down the whole back of the steering wheel, but they don't. They're on top of these like multimedia controls. So there's a situation where you could feel like you want to grab a gear and upshift, but instead you're going to change the volume. And that's a little bit surprising and concerning. This thing redlines at right around 5,500 RPM, which means that it's shifting rather quickly when you're going down the straight. And the paddles are a bit slow to respond, so it's hard to use them for that. I end up just driving this thing in auto because it's easier, but the transmission, not great. The other thing that's also making this worse is that the seating position it's all wrong. I have it set up to kind of where I like having my feet in relation to the pedals, but this steering wheel, it doesn't telescope enough, and I feel like it's super far away from me. So I kind of have to either sit too close to the wheel or sit too far from the pedals, and neither of those things are good either. And the seats themselves, they don't offer nearly enough bolstering. So on any kind of like tight turn like this, I'm sliding almost all the way out of them. Whoa! What is this car doing? Before I headed out here, I asked another one of our test team members what they would rate this thing on a fun scale from 0 to 10, and they said a 4. And I thought that was harsh until I got behind the wheel, and now I think that's pretty spot on. Yes, this thing has good low-end torque, so it's going to dig you out of a corner quickly, but other than that, there's not really that much that's enjoyable about driving it. In that Mustang, the harder you push it, the better it feels. It just gives you a little bit more grip. The way that it rotates, the feedback you get, it makes you want to drive it harder. And this thing, the harder you push it, the more imperfections that you find, and that just makes it less fun. But you're not just driving these cars out here, you're also going to have to live with them every day. And just like on the track, this thing feels huge inside. It's so big, in fact, that it could double feasibly as a family car and not just a muscle car, especially if you get the 4-door version. Now, we're going to start up here with the technology. As you can see, 2 very big, bright, sharp-looking screens that are pretty easy to use, even though we do wish that this cluster was a bit more configurable. And if you look down here, a pair of USB charging ports, a wireless charging pad, no complaints really on the tech front. And on top of that, the control scheme, it's okay, but not great. You have these weird touch-sensitive controls underneath the screen for the climate that activate kind of willy-nilly and aren't the best to use. Now, this thing definitely feels wider than the Mustang on the inside. You're getting more hip and shoulder room for sure, but as we mentioned on the track, those seats in the Ford, they're a lot better at holding you in place, even though these, they're still pretty comfortable for a long drive. But I do have to say though, I actually like the seats in the old Charger a bit more. But where the Charger really has a big advantage over the Mustang is here in the back seat. To me, this is actually the best back seat that you can get in any coupe. It's easy to get into thanks to these big door openings, and once you're back here, as you can see, there's just tons of space. You're actually getting an extra foot of space between the front and rear axles here in the Dodge versus the Ford. And once you're back here, the amenities, they're good too. You actually have heated rear seats, USB charging ports, and air vents, and you're not even going to find those in the back seat of something like a Honda Civic. And the trunk, yeah, this hatchback is awesome. It's got a really big opening and you can fit more stuff, bigger stuff, everything stuffed better back here than in the Mustang. It's so big, in fact, that you're gonna have trouble reaching items if they're slid up against the rear seat backs. Similarly, the Mustang, it has two big screens of its own, housed behind a single pane of glass, which is pretty cool. And this gauge cluster, it's a lot more configurable than the one in the Dodge, and it's also better at conveying information. So in track mode, for example, you get a nice big tack that stretches across the whole thing, much easier to tell when you need to shift. Now, Mustang also gets bonus points because it's got an extra USB port right back here behind the rearview mirror for you to plug in something like a dash cam or something else you could use. Our test car also has these optional $2,000 Recaro bucket seats, and they have pretty big thigh bolsters, so it can be a little bit hard to climb into the Mustang. But once you're in, they are a lot more enjoyable. They are supportive. They hold you in all the right places when you're on the track. And this thing also has a really good driving position in contrast to the Charger. In the backseat of the Mustang, it is tiny, so small that I'm not even gonna try to squeeze back there. But if you're smaller, you can probably fit your legs in. However, headroom is still gonna be an issue. Oh, and the cargo area in the Mustang, it's pretty big for a coupe, but that opening is smaller and there's a lot less room for your stuff than you're gonna have in the Dodge. So here in the Ford, the driving position, everything that has to do with driving is better, but the Dodge, it does offer you more features and especially more space if you're planning on using it as a family car. Before we wrap things up, if you've been enjoying our videos and want to help us make more of them, a like and subscribe go a long way. And if you've enjoyed seeing these two in action and you want to see them at U-Drags, or if you have any other suggestions for cars that we should test, drop them in the comments below. Now, let's talk money. Both of these cars, they are about the same price, and yes, both of them do feel expensive, and I would say that if you're looking for performance, only one of them is really worth that amount of money, and that is the Mustang. Yes, the Charger, it might be a 10th quicker to 60, but in every other way, this is the superior driving car. It feels more balanced, it has better handling, it's more predictable, and its rear-wheel drive dynamics are something that we really enjoyed all day. Now, if I'm making a case for the Dodge, it's got a much bigger back seat and a much bigger cargo area. But if those things are important to you, you're probably looking for something more of a family car than a muscle car. And yes, when it comes to being a muscle car, this thing, it's a letdown in pretty much every way. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.